Now it's time for Rockin Company's Rockin CU, making Colorado beautiful with natural stone construction 5 decades. Rockin Company, rockinco.com, and brought to you by Zadie's Deli, where they sling touchdowns with those great sandwiches stuffed with homemade corned beef, pastrami, the other deli treats, free parking front and back in Cherry Creek, 121 Adams Street, and they cater. And we welcome into the show. He's the publisher of BuffStampede.com on Scout.com network. Follow him on Twitter at AdamCM777. Adam Munsterteiger. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Swell. After all the good publicity, after the breakthrough football season, the rise and all the positives, it's an unfortunate story or two we're talking about here, football and basketball coming out of Boulder these days. Safety coach Joe Tumpkin's girlfriend claiming he's assaulted her more than 100 times. Colorado coming in for national publicity and criticism, and locally, and apologizing for not responding soon enough once, I guess, the girlfriend had approached them, and not doing something to suspend and remove Joe Tumpkin soon enough. Is this fair? Very tough situation for Colorado.
Yeah, no, they were definitely between a rock and a hard place in this situation, especially when you look to the first conversation that the victim had with Mike McIntyre, and she told him, hey, I don't want Joe Tumpkin to lose his job. I don't want this to affect him professionally. But if you're Mike McIntyre, I mean, that puts you in a really tough spot. And so he did what he thought was best and told his superior and Rick George. And, yeah, I mean, the two main criticisms here are one, that they didn't go to the Office of Equity and Compliance right away, and you've seen with some releases from Phil DeStefano and Rick George that they're changing their policies there, even if it's not somebody that's employed by the university, that now that needs to be reported right away. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you want to take a positive away from this really ugly, horrible situation, it's that some policies have changed. And then the thing that I know that a lot of people have had a hard time stomaching is the fact that Tumpkin called the defensive plays in the bowl game, and certainly with Colorado realizing that this progressed to the point where charges were filed against Joe Tumpkin, if they could go back, obviously they would change that. Mike McIntyre has background as a defensive guy. He certainly could have called the plays in that bowl game, and I think that's the thing that people are having the hardest time wrapping their head around now. There is a due process that has to take place. I know in domestic violence situations like this, you just want to drop the hammer right away. Just you read that Sports Illustrated and the victim detailing those abuses, and it breaks your heart, and you want to, again, come down with the hammer right away. But legally, you got to kind of go through a process. And in Colorado, the one thing they did is they took action once things were progressing in the courts. The second that temporary restraining order was made, they were aware of that. They put him on suspension. The second that restraining order was permanent, they fired him, or basically forced him to resign. So they certainly could have handled it differently. But this is not a scandal that a lot of people want to make it out to be.
It's not Baylor. I mean, the incredible denying of crimes and facilitating of criminal activity that seems to be going on at Baylor was unbelievable. It isn't that. If we look at the basketball program, a couple of years ago, Tad Boyle had an uncharacteristic team. He couldn't get them to do on the court any of the things that their ability would seem to indicate they could do, and they didn't play as a team. They didn't act as a team. And he said he had made a terrible mistake by assuming that he had upperclassmen who'd been winners and done it before, and this team would lead and correct itself, and he didn't jump all over them as college students and gave them their head and treated them maturely, and it was a big mistake. He's not doing that anymore. Xavier Johnson and Josh Gordon were suspended for 2 games, not just one, including a crucial road game against Cal that you would think Colorado had to have to save their, to help save their season. He came down hard on these guys. This is a different Tad Boyle.
Yeah, I think the term he used after that Askia Booker senior season and that team and how it unraveled, he said that from now on he was going to take the bull by the horns. I think by suspending those guys for a couple games, it seemed like that's what he was trying to do there. And it was good to see some of those younger guys get extended minutes. I think we've started to see Bryce Peters come into his own in the last a couple weeks, and Lucas Seward has finally seen the ball drop a few times and getting some confidence there. A different Tad Boyle in that sense. I mean, not to say he didn't discipline guys earlier, but it seemed like he would discipline guys for like a half or not let them start, and so he's definitely raised the stakes in that regard by suspending them for 2 games. He did say they're going to be back Sunday, and then they're hoping to get DeLeon Brown back from that concussion, as well as Josh Fortune, who was knocked out of that Washington game with the jaw injury. And obviously, if they're 14-11 right now, their chances of making the NCAA tournament are basically none unless they make a magical run in Vegas. So they're looking pretty good for the NIT. I still even think with Xavier Johnson and Wesley Gordon being back in the lineup, you still want to give those young guys run now that they've gained a little bit of confidence.
If I remember correctly, at the outset of the season, Tad Boyle was asked to give his opinion on this team, and he said overrated.
Yeah.
Was he just trying to light a fire under him at that time, or do you think he saw some of this unevenness that we've seen, or 0-7 start to the conference? Do you think he actually saw that coming?
The day he said that, I thought he was just trying to light a fire under them, honestly, because what they did and what we were seeing in practice was a team that was really deep and talented. Now I would lean towards that he saw something, he saw some of this coming. That said, I still think that Tad Boyle was a little bit surprised in terms of, 0-7 to start conference play. I don't think anybody could have seen that coming. So I think it's a little bit of both. The leadership issue, I don't think you could have, necessarily foreseen to be as bad as it's been, to have Xavier Johnson and Wesley Gordon, who are suspended for a game, laughing on the bench in the final minute of a game at Cal where they're losing by double digits is pretty telling. I don't think he quite knew it was going to be that big of an issue in terms of the leadership that we've seen, and that's been one of the biggest issues.
Okay, staying with basketball. So the game against Washington, the young Washington star slaps one, maybe two CU fans. Am I supposed to laugh at that, or am I supposed to go, hey, what the heck's going on? What's your take on that?
If it's a closed fist and these guys were really hurt, I think it's obviously an issue. And the students, if you read Jake Shapiro's piece, he got a chance to interview them after the game. They were having fun with it, and they had forgiven him, and they had made amends there. It's an open hand slap, and again, I mean. Yeah, they probably didn't deserve that. I mean, it's the student section's job to get under the skin of an opposing team, and Washington's taken action. Dime is suspended now, so they're certainly not laughing about it. But this is not something that needs to go through the police or anything. In my opinion, it wasn't necessarily an assault. It was more so an issue where a player went over the line and made contact with fans. But again, these guys were not needing any medical attention. They were right there in the stands the whole time.
All right, on our last minute or so here, let's get to a little bit of football as well. New late recruit Terrence Lang signs. We may have more time to talk about that in the future. He's weaned away from Southern Cal, another win for Colorado defensive end, who's already up to 265 pounds. But spring football's early again this year. I mean, really early.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a huge spring for the 8 new defensive starters they'll need. New coaches on the defensive side, including coordinator. Is spring football this early still a good idea?
Well, I think it is from the standpoint that if you get any major injuries during spring ball, you've got a long time for those guys to go and have surgery, rehab those injuries before camp starts, and I think that's one of the main reasons that Mike McIntyre wanted to do that. It does make for a little bit more of a break in between spring ball and the beginning of camp, which might lend to a little bit more rust, but these guys are still working out with the strength staff all the time. So I think it's good from the standpoint, again, that if you get any injuries, you have time for those guys to heal their injuries.
All right, you just geared up, taking your golf vacation after recruiting season. Now, spring football is a place for people to go to read buffstampede.com. Adam Munsterteiger. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.